My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am 67 years old. And on the night of March the 4th, at 11 minutes past 10, I lay completely still in my hospital bed with my eyes closed, a recording application running silently on the phone tucked beneath my pillow, while my son stood 3 feet from my face and told his wife that the smart move would be to put me in a home and take the money before I got any worse. I didn't flinch, I didn't open my eyes, I didn't let my breathing change by a single beat. I just breathed, in and out, slowly, the way you breathe when you want someone to believe you are asleep. The way you breathe when every nerve in your body is awake and listening and filing everything away into a neat, careful folder in your mind. The way you were trained, the way you have trained yourself over decades of doing careful, precise, important work with numbers and patterns and the stories hidden inside both. What they didn't know was that I had been awake for 40 minutes before they arrived. What they didn't know was that I had been watching and preparing for 6 weeks. What they didn't know was that the phone beneath my pillow had already captured 9 minutes and 43 seconds of their conversation by the time he said those particular words, and that I had a lawyer, a financial advisor, and a plan already in motion that they could not have imagined because they had never thought to imagine me as someone capable of having one. That is the thing about being underestimated. It is painful, but it is also, if you are paying attention, a very significant tactical advantage. This is that story. I want you to understand something before we go any further. I do not tell this story because I am bitter. I am not bitter. Bitterness is what happens when you swallow a wound and let it rot inside you. What I did instead was something entirely different. I took that wound, I examined it carefully in the light, I turned it over in my hands the way an accountant turns over a ledger, looking for the discrepancy she knows is there, and then I used it as a blueprint. I built something from it. Something lasting, something clean, something that I am proud of in ways that have nothing to do with winning and everything to do with becoming. I built it in silence, and that, I think, is difference between a woman who survives what is done to her and a woman who transforms because of it. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and this is how I transformed. I grew up in a small house on Elmcrest Drive in Dayton, Ohio, in a family that did not have very much money, but had enormous amounts of pride and discipline and a very specific understanding of what work meant and what it was for. My father, Harold Beckett, worked the floor at a paper plant on the east side of the city for 31 years. He came home every evening smelling of pulp and machinery oil, and he sat at the dinner table and asked every one of us how our day had gone, and he listened to the answers. He was not an educated man, but he was an attentive one, and attention, I have come to understand, is the rarest and most valuable form of love. My mother, Doris Beckett, cleaned houses 3 days a week and made the most extraordinary vegetable soup you have ever tasted with whatever was left in the refrigerator on Friday evenings. She made something out of nothing with such consistency that it stopped seeming like a miracle and started seeming like a skill, which, of course, is exactly what it was. Neither of my parents went to college. Both of them told me, from the time I could understand language, that I would. It was not a dream in our household. It was a plan. I graduated from Ohio State University in 1979 with a degree in accounting and a minor in finance. I was 22 years old, and I remember walking across that stage thinking about Harold and his 31 years of pulp and machinery oil, and I made a promise to myself that I would spend those years doing something I was genuinely good at, something that mattered, something that made the investment of his labor worth something. I kept that promise. I married Robert Whitfield in the summer of 1981 at a small ceremony in the backyard of my parents' house on Elmcrest Drive. Robert was a quiet, thoughtful man who had grown up in Columbus and who taught high school chemistry at Jefferson High and coached the junior varsity baseball team every spring with a patience and steadiness that I fell in love with before I even understood what I was feeling. He was not flashy. He was not ambitious in the way the world uses that word. He was consistent and honest and genuinely kind, and in 34 years of marriage, he never once raised his voice at me and never once made me feel small. We built a life together that was not spectacular by any external measure, but was, from the inside, deeply and deliberately good. We had 2 children. Our daughter, Diane Whitfield, was born in August of 1983. She is 40 years old now and lives in Portland, Oregon, with her wife, Susan, and their 2 rescue dogs, a golden retriever named Fig and a beagle named Clementine. Diane is a hospital administrator. She is brisk and organized and warmly capable, and she calls me every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock exactly without fail. Even during her busiest weeks, even when she has had almost no sleep, she calls. Our son, Mitchell Whitfield, was born in January of 1986. He is 47 years old now. He lives 12 miles from my house in a suburb called Holloway Ridge, in a 4-bedroom house he purchased in 2012 when the market was good and his confidence was high. Mitchell calls me when he needs something. I want to be precise about that distinction because it is not a small one. It is, in fact, the entire shape of this story. I spent 31 years working in accounting and financial services. The last 17 of those years I spent as a senior accounts manager at Garfield & Rowe Financial Services, which is a mid-sized firm that handles investment management, estate planning, and business accounting for clients across 3 counties. I was good at my work in the way that people are good at things they were built for. Not just skilled, but genuinely suited. I understood numbers the way some people understand music. I could look at a set of accounts and hear the thing that was off in the same way a musician hears a note that isn't quite right in a chord. I retired from Garfield & Rowe in February of 2014, 1 year before Robert died. We had planned it together, a careful, organized retirement with clearly structured income, investment accounts that would sustain us comfortably, a fully paid mortgage, no debt of any kind. We had been deliberate with money our entire lives, because we had both grown up in households where money's absence was something you felt every single day, and we had decided early on that our children would not feel that. We succeeded at that, perhaps more thoroughly than was good for Mitchell. Robert passed away on the 14th of February, 2015, Valentine's Day, which is either a cruel irony or a kind symmetry, depending on how you choose to look at it, and I have spent years going back and forth on that question. He died from a cardiac event in the night. He was 61 years old. He was asleep beside me. The doctors told me he would not have felt anything, and I have chosen, deliberately and completely, to believe them. After Robert died, I kept moving. Structure saved me. I had my routines, my books, my licenses. I kept my CPA certification current, even in retirement, because I have always believed that credentials are something you maintain whether or not you are using them, the same way you maintain a house, whether or not guests are coming. I met with my financial advisor, James Beaumont, twice a year as we always had. I kept the house exactly as Robert and I had kept it together, because it felt important to me that nothing about the physical space should signal that a capable person had left the premises. Mitchell is the kind of man who carries his confidence in his chest, which is a different thing from carrying it in his mind. He had Robert's jaw and a certain ease of manner that people often mistake for competence, and for many years I think he mistook it that way himself. He works in commercial real estate, brokering and managing properties. He married Tricia Alderton in the spring of 2011. Tricia is 44 years old. She is a former pharmaceutical sales representative who left her job after Caleb, their first child, was born in 2013. Their second child, Sophie, came along in 2015. Tricia is a precise, ambitious woman who measures spaces when she enters them, not with a tape measure, but with her eyes, and those eyes have always moved over everything in my house with a quiet, cataloging attention that I noticed from her very first visit. Mitchell and Tricia have beautiful children and a beautiful house, and a beautiful truck in the driveway that costs $1,400 a month to lease. They have Caleb and Sophie enrolled in a private school called Hartwell Academy, where the annual tuition is $12,000 per child. They have a vacation property on Lake Erie, a 3-bedroom cottage that cost them considerably more than they had. And they have underneath all of this beauty a financial structure that is more architecture than foundation. It looks sound from the outside, but the inside has been under pressure for years. I knew this before Mitchell came to me the first time. I am an accountant. I can read a family's financial situation the same way a doctor can read a patient's face. I had been watching for years. I had not said anything because Mitchell did not ask, and Mitchell does not respond well to information he hasn't requested. He came to me in November of 2022, sat at my kitchen table, accepted the coffee I poured him, and explained that he was in a temporary cash flow problem, that the commercial real estate market had turned unexpectedly, that 2 contracts had fallen through in the same month, that he needed $50,000 to stabilize things while he waited for other deals to close. I listened. I asked 3 questions. I looked at his face while he answered. Then I told him I would think about it. I thought for 1 week. During that week, I called Margaret Hollins, my estate lawyer, whom I have used for 9 years, and asked her to draft a simple loan agreement. Clear terms, modest interest, a repayment schedule, 2 witnesses, a notary. Standard. When Mitchell came back for the check, I gave him the agreement first. He looked at it like it was something I had done to insult him personally. "Mom," he said, "you're making this into something it doesn't need to be." I said, "I make everything into exactly what it needs to be. That is how the money got there in the first place." He signed. I wrote him a check for $25,000. Not the full 50, because I had decided that 25 was the number I was comfortable with, and I am a woman who makes financial decisions based on comfort, not pressure. He took the check. He cashed it within the week. He did not make a single one of the agreed-upon monthly repayments. Not one. May of 2023. He came back. This time Tricia came with him. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, and Tricia talked about the pandemic's long tail, about the children's schooling needs, about how family meant supporting each other through difficulty, and she said all of it with the particular smooth fluency of someone who has rehearsed. I listened to every word. I wrote a check for $15,000. Margaret drafted a second agreement. When I put the paperwork on the table, Tricia's smile went perfectly, precisely still, the way a photograph goes still. All the warmth drains out of it, and what's left is just the shape. "We're not strangers, Eleanor," she said. "No," I said. "You're family, which is exactly why we're doing it this way. People who love each other honor their agreements." Mitchell signed. Tricia did not speak to me for 3 months after that visit. In September of 2023, I began having episodes of vertigo. My doctor, Dr. Patricia Osei, ordered tests. The results were benign, an inner ear issue, manageable with medication, but the testing required an overnight hospital stay for observation, and Mitchell drove me in. He stayed that first night. I fell asleep early around 9, and I slept in that thin, half-open way you sleep in hospitals where the sounds keep pressing through. I woke at some point to hushed voices. Mitchell was in the corner of the room near the window, speaking in a low voice into his phone. I could not hear every word. Hospitals have that white noise of ventilation and corridor sounds, but I caught enough. Power of attorney. If things progress. Assets. I lay very still. I did not open my eyes. I lay there for a long time after the voice went quiet, and I thought about the 2 checks, and Tricia's cataloging eyes, and the missed repayments, and that word assets, used while standing at the foot of a hospital bed, with what was believed to be a sleeping woman in it. I am an accountant. I look at numbers, and I find the pattern underneath them. The pattern underneath these numbers was not complicated. It was not ambiguous. It was exactly what it looked like. I did not confront Mitchell. I thanked him for staying. I let him drive me home. I asked about Caleb's soccer season and Sophie's piano lessons, and I watched his face and I filed everything I observed. And then I called Margaret Hollins. That call on Monday morning was the first day second chapter of my life. Margaret and I spent 3 hours reviewing everything. My will, every beneficiary designation, every transfer on death arrangement, every piece of property. James Beaumont found one thing, a small joint savings account. Mitchell listed as co-signer, holding $11,200. I had genuinely forgotten it was still structured that way. James and I had it restructured in 5 business days. Then I worked through everything else, updating my will, changing beneficiaries, drafting a new power of attorney naming not Mitchell, but my friend Carol Simmons, who has been my closest friend for 40 years and who would sooner walk into moving traffic than allow anyone to take advantage of me. I did none of this visibly. Mitchell called twice during this period, once to ask how I was feeling, once to mention a lovely assisted living community in Westerville he thought was worth knowing about just in case. I thanked him warmly and asked about Sophie's piano recital. Now I need to tell you about the other thing. The thing I had been building quietly for 8 years. In the year following Robert's death, a former colleague reached out, Ruth Chen, who had left Garfield and Rowe to start a small manufacturing business and was drowning in accounts she didn't understand. She asked if I would consult for her on an informal basis. I said yes. I helped her untangle 3 years of muddled bookkeeping and build a proper reporting structure. It took 4 months. By the end, Ruth's business had clarity it had never had, and I had found something I had not expected, that the skills had not dimmed, that the particular satisfaction of making order from disorder had not diminished even a fraction. Ruth told 2 colleagues. Those 2 colleagues told others. Within a year, I had 3 clients. Within 2 years, 6. By 2022, I was billing approximately 20 hours a week, at rates that reflected my 31 years of experience. By the beginning of 2024, my practice was generating $112,000 annually in gross revenue from 9 long-term retainer clients. Not one person in my family knew this existed. I had built it entirely in silence. 8 years of quiet, careful, deliberate work while my son drove past my house and thought about the woman inside as a fixed, diminishing, manageable thing. In February of 2024, I had a second health event. A fall in my kitchen. Not serious, no broken bones, but enough that my neighbor Dorothy Haynes called 911 and let herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. I spent 2 nights at St. Vincent Medical Center. Mitchell arrived 40 minutes after Dorothy's call. He was attentive the first evening. During the second evening, the night of March the 4th, he came back with Tricia. They arrived at 9:52. I know the exact time because I had been awake since 9/11, looking at the wall clock, lying in the particular quiet of a hospital night. I heard Mitchell's voice in the hallway before they entered. I reached quietly beneath my pillow. I opened the voice memo application. I pressed record. I tucked the phone back, closed my eyes, and arranged my face and my breathing into the pattern of a woman who is deeply, peacefully asleep. They came in softly. Tricia pulled the curtain. I felt the shift in the air. Mitchell said very quietly, "She's out." Tricia said, "Did you talk to the Westerville place again?" Mitchell said, "Yeah, they have availability. It wouldn't be a bad move, honestly. She can't keep living alone." "What happens if Dorothy's not around next time?" Tricia said, "What about the house?" Mitchell said, "If she goes into memory care, we'd need to sell it to cover costs. Or we could look at getting her to sign it over before that, while she can still sign." Tricia said, "And the accounts." And then Mitchell said, and I reviewed this recording 4 times before I could fully absorb it, "Put her in a home and take the money before she gets any worse. Honestly, Trish, she's not going to know the difference 6 months from now." I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't let my breathing change. I lay there while those words settled into the room around me, and I thought about Harold at the paper plant and Doris and her Friday soup, and I thought about Robert and the 34 years we built so carefully together, and I thought about the word dignity, what it costs, what it looks like when someone decides you have used yours up. They stayed for 23 more minutes. Before they left, Mitchell came to my bedside and put his hand on mine. "Sleep well, Mom." His voice was gentle. It sounded completely sincere. The recording ran for 31 minutes and 47 seconds. If you are still watching this, I want to stop for just a moment and speak directly to you. I know some of you are watching, because something in this story feels familiar, not like entertainment, but like memory. The specific cold feeling when someone you love looks at you and sees only what you are worth as a resource. If that is you, leave a word in the comments below. You don't have to tell the whole story. Just let me know you are there. And if this channel has found you at the right moment, the subscribe button is right there. Because what I did next is the part I think matters most. I was discharged on the morning of March the 6th. Mitchell drove me home. He made tea. He was warm and present and entirely the son I had raised for those 90 minutes. And I sat across from him and drank the tea and asked about Sophie's piano recital and looked at his face with the quiet, steady attention I have given to numbers my entire life. He left at 11:37. I sat alone for 47 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and sent Margaret Hollins an audio file. Her response came 47 minutes later, "Call me when you can." We spoke for 1 hour and 22 minutes. By the end, 3 things were in motion. The formal preservation of the recording, the scheduling of a family financial meeting, framed to Mitchell as a routine estate planning update, and the full formal structuring of what I had been building for 8 years. Margaret helped me establish Whitfield Financial Consulting, LLC, proper formation documents, a formal business account, cleaned client contracts, complete revenue records going back to 2016, a succession plan. We spent 4 weeks making it thoroughly, undeniably airtight. Then she drafted the meeting invitations. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday, April the 19th, at 9:30 in the morning, at Margaret's office on 5th and Hartwell. Mitchell and Tricia received formal invitations. They RSVP'd within 24 hours. Diane received a different letter, one that told her there were important family financial matters requiring her presence, and that I needed her support. Diane booked a flight from Portland that same afternoon. She arrived Friday evening. I made dinner. We sat at the kitchen table with glasses of white wine, and I told her a measured, careful version of what had happened. Not everything, not the recording, not yet, but enough. She sat very still while I talked. Then she said, "What do you need me to do?" I said, "I need you to sit beside me and be exactly who you are." She nodded. We finished our wine. We went to bed. Margaret's conference room overlooks the river. When Mitchell and Tricia arrived at 9:58, they found the room already populated in ways they had not expected. Margaret at the head of the table, me beside her, Diane across from me, Margaret's associate Rebecca Park with her notepad, and James Beaumont in the chair near the window. Mitchell did a slight, almost imperceptible recalibration when he registered the number of people. He smiled easily. He settled into his chair with the expression of a man who has assumed the game is his to manage. The first 20 minutes were exactly what Mitchell expected. Margaret walked through my estate, property, accounts, retirement income, all measured and clear. He nodded. He asked 2 reasonable questions. He was in every to be surface respect, a dutiful son attending to his mother's affairs. Then Margaret said, "I also want to make sure everyone is clear on the current power of attorney arrangement because it has been updated." Mitchell's posture shifted slightly. As of February the 14th of this year, Margaret said, "Eleanor has designated her friend Carol Simmons as primary agent for both financial and medical decisions in the event that Eleanor is unable to make those decisions herself. That supersedes any prior informal arrangement." Mitchell said, "I wasn't aware that was changing." "It changed," I said. He looked at me. I held his gaze with complete steadiness. "We should have discussed that, Mom," he said. "That's a significant decision." "It is," I said. "That's why I made it carefully." Tricia was looking at the window. Her hands were very still. Then Margaret said, "Eleanor, would you like to walk the room through the business?" I said yes. I reached into the folder in front of me and placed a single document in the center of the table. 1 page, clean typeset, clear sections. Formation date, revenue history by year, from 2016 through 2023. Current annual gross revenue, client base summary, business account balance as of March the 31st, and a conservative business valuation. Mitchell picked it up. He read it once. Then he went back to the top and read it again. "You've been running a business," he said, "for 8 years, I said. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. Why didn't you tell us?" I let a moment pass before I answered. "Because I learned over the past 2 years to be careful about what I share," I said, "and with whom." The silence in that room had weight and texture. Diane was looking at her brother with an expression I recognized. The particular grief of someone who has just confirmed something they had spent a long time hoping wasn't true. "I also want to share something else," I said. Margaret opened a second folder. "On the evening of March the 4th, I said, you both came to visit me at St. Vincent Medical Center. My voice was even, conversational. I was awake when you arrived. I had been awake for 40 minutes. I had my phone beneath my pillow. I recorded the conversation." Mitchell said, "Mom, I'm not going to play it," I said. "I don't need to. Margaret has a copy. I have a copy. Diane has listened to it in full." I glanced at my daughter. She was looking at her brother steadily and with great sadness. "What I want you to understand is that I am not here to punish you. I am here because I love you, and because the person who raised you would not recognize the conversation on that recording, and because I believe that somewhere beneath the fear and the financial pressure and the decisions you've been making from that fear, you know that too." Mitchell had his jaw set. He wasn't looking at me. "I understand that things are hard," I said. "I understand the business has been struggling and that the school tuition is a weight and the lake house is a weight, and fear makes people think in ways they would not otherwise think." I paused. "But you were standing at the foot of my hospital bed, and you spoke about my life the way you speak about a problem you need to solve. And I need you to understand that I heard every word, and that I am not, and I have never been, and I will never be, a problem to be solved." Mitchell's eyes had gone red at the edges. He pressed his fingers flat against the table. "Mom," he said, and for the first time in this conversation his voice sounded young, like the 9-year-old who had once asked me why some families didn't love each other. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said, "but an apology is the beginning of a conversation. It is not the resolution of one." James Beaumont slid a document across the table, a repayment schedule. The 2 outstanding loans, $47,214 including accrued interest, structured over 5 years, monthly installments of $787, first payment in 30 days. "This is what I am asking," I said, "not out of vengeance, not as punishment, out of the belief that agreements mean something, that a signature means something, That family is not a reason to abandon those things. It is a reason to honor them more carefully than you would with anyone else. Mitchell picked up the document and read it. Then he set it down. Okay, he said. Good, I said. Then I looked at Trisha. She finally looked back at me. I don't need to know exactly what you were thinking, I said carefully. What I know is that you are the mother of my grandchildren and that I have considered them in every decision I have made. I have considered your family's circumstances, and this, I gestured toward the repayment document, is the most loving thing I know how to do. It says I trust you to be adults. It says I am a person worth honoring. I believe we are all capable of more than what happened in that hospital room. But that capacity has to be chosen. Trisha opened her mouth slightly. I said gently, you don't need to say anything today. Take it home, read it. Think about the family you want to be. The meeting concluded at 12:21. Margaret walked Mitchell and Trisha out. Diane and I stayed at the table. When the door closed, she reached across and took both my hands. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it in the deep, bone-level way I had not meant it for a very long time. The repayment schedule has been honored every single month since May of 2024. $787, transferred on the 15th of every month, without a word attached. I have not mentioned the recording again. Mitchell calls more often now. Not every week, but more than before. The calls are different. They have a new carefulness to them, a new attention. We are slowly, imperfectly finding our way to a new version of a relationship that the old version could not have held. It is not the same as what I had hoped for when he was born. But the wisdom is in working honestly with what actually is. Trisha came to my house in July following the meeting. She brought Sophie. Sophie sat at the kitchen table and drew horses in a sketchbook while Trisha asked me, quietly, if I would be willing to help her younger sister, who was trying to start a small bookkeeping practice. I made coffee. I pulled out files. We sat at that table, the same table where Mitchell had asked me for $50,000. And I taught Trisha things her sister would need to know. We were there for 2 hours. She took notes. Sophie drew 12 horses. I do not know whether Trisha felt ashamed. I did not need her to feel ashamed. What I needed was for her to understand that the woman she had looked at in that hospital room, mentally catalogued as an asset to convert, a problem to place, was a person who could still give her something, who had things worth learning from, who was not diminishing but continuing. I think she understood that by the time she left. Diane calls every Sunday at 9. Last November, she told me that watching what I did in that conference room was the most powerful thing she had ever witnessed, that she thinks about it in her own difficult moments, that it changed something in how she understands what strength looks like. I told her. I was afraid. I was afraid every day from the moment I first heard those hushed voices in the hospital room corner. Fear did not leave me. It was present at every step, in Margaret's office, in the restructuring of my accounts, in the months of keeping my face and voice exactly the same while my son casually mentioned nice places in Westerville, in the moment I pressed record. Fear was there for all of it. But here is what I know about fear. It is not the absence of power. It is the signal that something you love is at risk. And what you do with that signal, whether you freeze inside it, or whether you use it as information, as fuel, as the precise measurement of what needs to be protected, that is where your life is decided. I used it as information. I got quiet. I got organized. I got legal and careful and very specific about what I needed to do and in what order. And then I walked into a room and I let the truth do exactly what the truth has always been built to do. I let it speak for itself. There is someone watching this right now who is in the middle of something, who has that specific cold feeling, not quite anger and not quite grief, because someone in their life has been making decisions about their future without them. Maybe it is a parent deciding for you. Maybe it is a partner. Maybe it is a sibling or a child or someone you trusted with the particular trust that only comes from years of closeness. I want to say this to you with the full weight of someone who has been exactly where you are. You are not what they have decided you are. You are not the diminished version of yourself they have been planning around. You are the person who built what you built, who knows what you know, who is sitting very still right now with more capacity than they have given you credit for, and more time than they have assumed you have. Get quiet. Get careful. Get organized. Make your lists. Update your documents. Talk to the people who can help you, and do not announce a single thing until you are ready to speak from complete preparation. The loudest comebacks are built in silence, not in the moment of confrontation, That moment is only the last sentence of a very long, very deliberate paragraph. They are built in the early mornings when no one is watching. In the phone calls you make that other people don't know you've made. In the folders you keep, and the receipts you save, and the agreements you insist upon, even when someone tells you that you are making things into more than they need to be. You are not making things into more than they need to be. You are making them into exactly what they are. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am 67 years old. I have a financial consulting practice that generates $112,000 a year. I have a lawyer who knows my full situation, a financial advisor who has my accounts structured exactly as I intend, a power of attorney held by a woman who would protect me with her life, and a recording of 31 minutes and 47 seconds that I hope I never need to use again. I did not yell, I did not cry, I did not wait for anyone to believe in me before I believed in myself. And I want to ask you, before you go, if you found out today that someone close to you had been quietly deciding your future without you, what would your first move be? Not the angry move, the real one. The one that comes from that still, clear place inside you that knows exactly who you are and what you are worth. Leave it below. I read every single one. To every single person who has watched this video all the way to the end, I want to take a moment and speak to you heart to heart. Thank you. Thank you for sitting with Eleanor's story, for giving it the full weight of your attention, for understanding that the slow and careful kind of courage is still courage. This community, the people who find this channel and stay, is something I am genuinely grateful for every single day. Revenge Chronicles exists for the woman who has been invisible in her own story, for the woman who is sitting quietly right now with more power than anyone around her has bothered to notice, for the woman who is just beginning to understand that her silence is not her weakness, it is her preparation. If this story gave you something today, please subscribe so you never miss another one. We are here every day with a new story, a new woman, a new reminder that the quietest voice in the room is often the one that lasts the longest. Share this with someone who needs it. And take care of yourself today, the way only you know how.